Hi, I'm John Mello with Video University, and today we're going to be doing a very rudimentary introductory look into After Effects. So today we are working within After Effects CS3, but what I'm going to show you applies to all the versions of After Effects, and I'm going to show you the project timeline. And it looks just like the timeline you're familiar with in any type of editing application. You've got your time markers, your layers, and your playhead, which you can move around. And I happen to have a lot of RAM in this machine, so it kind of paints on as you go, but your experience may vary depending on how fast you have your computer set up. But I'm going to show you some of the key techniques of manipulating some of the footage later on in another program, but right now I'm going to show you pretty much what all these little things mean and what you can expect by pushing them. Of course, nothing quite compares to pushing the buttons yourself and fiddling around, but it's always a fun time. Especially this one here. If we move in right here, this is called the graph editor, and this will give you a graph that you can manipulate your F-curves and Bezier handles to really fine-tune your animations. Here we have Brainstorm, which is a really cool thing that I find myself using sometimes, where you kind of fall into a crutch of animation where your stuff is kind of all looking the same, because you have certain techniques that you like and go to all the time. Well, if you have a certain animation set up and you go to Brainstorm, it will open up other possibilities of animation, and it'll give you about 10 or 12 different other variations of the animation that you have currently set in your timeline. So it's very handy, and we'll go over Brainstorm a little bit more in another session where we'll actually be animating something, and then we can use the Brainstorm to come up with other ways of animating that program properties. Here we have the motion blur. Makes things, when they move, blur a little bit, adds a little bit of realism, and you can really play around with motion blur by going into your camera settings in the composition settings, which we'll go over at a later time, and you can increase the accuracy of the motion blur, the streaks, all that good stuff. Over here we have frame blending, which if you ever time manipulate your footage, you can blend the frames together and give it a smoother look. This is the hide layers icon, and pretty much this is just organizational help. When you get into a project, like we'll go over in a few weeks, where you have hundreds and hundreds of layers, it can kind of get ridiculous. So you hide layers that you're not working on, and then click the hide layer icon, and your hundreds of layers suddenly turn into a manageable amount of layers that you can work with easily and not have to use up your entire screen. Draft 3D is another powerful thing, live update and Draft 3D. When you have your icon set in 3D, which happens to be this little box here, so if you have your element in 3D space, turn on Draft 3D, and it won't apply lights or any effects like that to the 3D element. It'll just give you the basic 3D element. And that also saves on RAM, and makes things go a little quicker when you're in your rough out stages. Here we have live update, and all that is just exactly what it is. Live update is you move the cursor, it'll react on your viewer. Okay, and this open parent composition is the same thing as alt clicking on a set composition in your timeline, and it'll open up a pre-comp, which we'll go over a little bit later on. But a pre-composition in After Effects is the same thing as nesting your layers in Final Cut or Avid, or I believe Vegas also has a nesting, or they may call it something else. But ultimately it's when you take an entire timeline and boil it down to one layer that you can access by double clicking that layer, opening it, and getting all of its properties. But it's just an organizational thing where if you have tons of elements that kind of live together but don't interact with anything else, you can pre-compose those elements and then continue on with your project and not have to worry about layers getting out of hand or things moving around. So over here we have obviously the frame rate that we're working at, 2997, and your time on the timeline when you can scrub just by dragging. It'll also tell you in real time where you're at. You can also change this to frames if you prefer to work in the frames mode, where you're not looking at real time feedback and you want to know I'm on frame 45. You can set this to display frames as well. Over here we have an empty text layer, which for some reason was put in there, but we'll get rid of that. Here's the clip that is pre-rendered, but I just wanted to go over some of the transform properties. You're probably going to be very familiar with these from Final Cut and all that good stuff, and they are exactly as they look: opacity, rotation, scale, position, and anchor point. Anchor point and position are kind of the same, but not quite. Position moves the entire object left, right, up, or down, or in Z space, depending if you have the 3D selector selected. Anchor point just sets the point at which it animates. So naturally, everything comes in with the center anchor point, or 0, 0. And if you move that anchor point in X or Y, or Z if it's set to 3D, then the object will move slightly differently. And we can definitely go over all that when we get into a reverse engineered project in the upcoming episodes. Over here we have just real simple colors. So if you have a project and you want everything to kind of live in the same color zones, like if you have if you're animating a character and you want all the legs and arms to be a certain color, so you know really quick what they are on the timeline. If we roll over to the timeline here, we'll see that. Let me turn it to a color that will be obvious. Let's do lavender. Okay, that's not really obvious, but you get the idea. It'll change your timeline display to be in lavender. So let me go, we can see the whole timeline now. So let me go over and change the color again to say yellow, and boom, see how we see it change to yellow. So when you have a lot of layers here, those colors can really come in handy. So let's go up over here. We're going to do the full circle. This is my eyes. This is what my eyes look like when I do After Effects sometimes. Over here we have the binoculars, and what the binoculars do is they allow you to search within your project. So this is like a search. If you have the newest version of After Effects, you'll see the binoculars have been replaced with an actual search. Over here we have a folder. You create that. It creates a new folder in your project bin, which you can then drag and drop things into to help organize the bin. Here we have a new composition icon, and what this does is it creates a new composition. You click that and you can input your settings with your frame rates, your resolution, your time that you want the composition, and this icon does that. Or you can just drag a clip from your project window onto this icon, which we'll do right now. We'll take this donor's choose, we'll just drag it down on the comp, boom, creates a new composition. So you can see it right over here. Over here we have the bit depth. I normally always work in 16-bit just because it reduces the amount of banding that gradients have, and I know you'll notice that if you're working in DV and you have a kind of a slight gradient in your graphics, it will band. It'll look like a rainbow of tones of that color. 16-bit color space, while it will make your files a little bit bigger, will release some of that banding, alleviate some of that banding. Of course, it goes all the way up to 32-bit. 32-bit is good linear space if you're going to be working from start to finish in that color space. And we'll go over that a little bit later. And of course, this is the trash bin. Sometimes a lot of my stuff goes in there. Drag it, boom, it's gone. So overall, this is the After Effects CS3 workspace. And hopefully it correlates to some cool graphics that you'll be creating in the near future. We'll be back with more videos going into a little bit more detail onto each one of these sections, and ultimately put together a small little graphic that we can animate and insert into your videos. Right now we'll play back this little graphic here. This is the graphic that was made to show a website in action. It was just created in Photoshop and then animated in After Effects to give the illusion that somebody was navigating their website. This was just for a quick B-roll thing, so I gave a little bit more than the editor needed. So he probably cut in here, and then probably cut out here, and then you know, so it was very nice. They loved it, and this illustrates a slight gradient from a light. This layer is actually in 3D, and we're animating a camera. So all that stuff will be gone into the next couple of videos. Hopefully this answered some questions and alleviated some issues you may have had with After Effects. Thank you for watching.